In the shadow of Mount Hiei, where the mist clings to the ancient cedars like a ghostly shroud, there stood the decaying manor of the Nabeshima clan. The village below whispered of the house's fading glory, a place where the wood groaned under the weight of secrets, and the paper doors were yellowed by time. Inside lived Lord Mitsushage, a man whose heart had grown as cold and brittle as the winter frost that bit at his windows. By his side was his most loyal attendant, Ryozoji, a man of quiet dignity who served the Lord with an unwavering devotion that few could comprehend. Ryozoji was never truly alone, for he shared his small quarters with a cat named Tama, a creature of pure white fur and amber eyes that seemed to see into the soul. To the world, Tama was a mere animal, but to the lonely attendant, she was the silent witness to his joys, and the only comfort in his many sorrows. Lord Mitsushage, however, viewed the world through the lens of suspicion, and his envy of Ryozoji's inner peace began to fester like an open wound. One fateful evening, during a game of Go that stretched late into the night, a trivial disagreement ignited the Lord's long-simmering rage. In a fit of madness fueled by sake and pride, Mitsushage drew his blade and struck down his most faithful servant before the moon could even cross the zenith. Ryozoji fell without a cry, his blood staining the tatami mats in a crimson map of betrayal that would never be erased. Tama, hiding behind a tattered screen, watched as the life faded from her master's eyes, her small heart shattering with a grief that surpassed nature. As the Lord wiped his blade and called for his guards to dispose of the traitor, the cat crept toward the cooling body of the only person who had ever loved her. She began to lick the blood from Ryozoji's wounds, not out of hunger, but out of a desperate primal ritual of mourning. In the folklore of the East, it is said that if a cat laps the blood of its murdered master, it transcends the animal realm and becomes something much darker. As the moon turned blood-red behind the clouds, Tama's form began to ripple and stretch, her bones cracking and reforming in a grotesque dance of metamorphosis. She was no longer a simple house cat. She was becoming a Bakeneko, a monster cat of immense spiritual power and vengeful intent. Her tail split into two distinct appendages, lashing behind her like whips of shadow that could command the very air. Her amber eyes grew wide and luminous, burning with a fire that reflected the hellish landscape of her new existence. She stood on two legs, her height reaching that of a human woman, though her face remained a haunting mask of feline features. That night, the Nabeshima manor fell silent. But it was a silence thick with the smell of ozone and the sound of phantom footsteps. Lord Mitsushage retreated to his bedchambers, haunted not by guilt, but by the nagging feeling that he was being watched from the rafters. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard a low, rhythmic purr that sounded more like a grinding of stones than a sign of affection. He called for his concubine, the beautiful Lady Otoyama, hoping her presence would dispel the creeping dread that chilled his bones. But as Lady Otoyama entered the room, the flickering oil lamps cast a shadow behind her that did not match her graceful movements. The shadow on the wall had pointed ears and a tail that swayed with a predatory hunger. Even as the woman smiled sweetly at her lord, little did Mitsushage know that the real Otoyama lay dead beneath the floorboards. Her throat torn open by the beast that now wore her skin, the Bakeneko had begun its revenge, not with a sudden strike, but with a slow, agonizing psychological torment. Day by day, the Lady Otoyama drained the Lord's health, whispering poisonous words into his ear while he slept. She would dance in the gardens at night, her true form visible only to the terrified servants who dared to peek through the shutters. They saw a giant cat wearing a kimono, leaping over the walls with unnatural agility, catching birds mid-air and devouring them whole. The servants whispered of the cat's curse, and many fled the manor, leaving only the most desperate and the most doomed behind. Mitsushage's skin began to turn gray, and his eyes grew hollow, as if his very life force was being sipped away through a straw. He suffered from terrible nightmares where Ryozoji's headless body walked the halls, guided by a white cat with two tails. Every physician in the province was summoned, but none could find a physical ailment that explained the Lord's rapid decline. "It is the spirit," the monks whispered, though they were too afraid to enter the gates of the cursed Nabeshima estate. The Bakeneko reveled in his suffering, enjoying the way the powerful Lord now trembled at the sound of a rustling leaf. But revenge is a fire that consumes the vessel that carries it, and Tama's soul was drifting further and further from the master she sought to honor. She began to target the innocent, the guards who had followed orders and the maids who had only known fear. Her hunger for vengeance grew into a hunger for chaos, a common trap for the minor spirits of the regional myths. One young guard, a man named Komori, who had once shared a crust of bread with Ryosoji, noticed the strangeness of Lady Otoyama. He noticed that she never cast a shadow in the midday sun, and that she refused to touch the sacred salt placed at the door. Komori knew of the legends of the Bakeneko, for his grandmother had told him stories of spirits that hid in plain sight. He began to keep a watch, sharpening his spear and praying to the local kami for the strength to face a ghost. One evening he saw the lady drinking oil from the lamps, her tongue long and barbed, her eyes glowing in the dark. The sight sent a shiver of terror through his spine, but his loyalty to the memory of Ryusoji kept his feet planted firmly on the ground. He realized that the spirit was not just punishing the murderer, but destroying the entire lineage and anyone caught in the crossfire. "This is not justice," Komori whispered to the night air. "This is a tragedy that refuses to end." He decided to confront the beast, knowing that a direct battle with a Bakeneko was almost certainly a death sentence. He sought out a traveling priest who lived in a small shrine on the edge of the forest, a man known for his knowledge of tricksters and spirits. The priest gave him a mirror of polished bronze and a sachet of powdered wolf's bone, saying, "The cat hates the truth and fears the wild." Armed with these tools, Komori returned to the manor just as a heavy storm began to roll in from the mountains. Thunder shook the foundations of the house, and lightning illuminated the halls in jagged bursts of white light. He found the Lord's chamber door open, the scent of rot and lilies hanging heavy in the air. Mitsushage lay on his futon, gasping for air, while the Bakeneko sat upon his chest, its claws digging into his silk robes. It had dropped the disguise of Lady Otoyama, revealing its true monstrous form in the flickering shadows. "Stop!" Komori cried out, his voice cracking but his hand steady as he raised the bronze mirror.
Ah!
The Bakeneko turned, hissing with a sound that could have come from the depths of the underworld. In the mirror's reflection, the beast saw not a monster, but the small white kitten it used to be, sitting in Ryosoji's lap. The vision caused the spirit to hesitate, the memories of warmth and kindness clashing with the cold steel of its current hate. Komori threw the powder of wolf's bone into the air, creating a cloud that stung the creature's sensitive nose and eyes. The Bakeneko leapt from the bed, its two tails lashing out and shattering the furniture with a single blow. "He killed him," the cat shrieked, its voice a horrific blend of human speech and animal yowls. "I know," Komori replied, "but Ryusoji was a man of peace. He would not want his memory to be a pile of corpses in a house of ghosts." The beast lunged at Komori, its claws narrowly missing his throat as he rolled across the floor. The battle raged through the room, a desperate struggle between a mortal man and a spirit of regional myth. The Lord watched from the bed, his eyes wide with a terror that finally surpassed his arrogance. He saw the consequences of his actions manifested in the fur and fangs of the creature he had helped create. The Bakeneko pinned Komori to the wall, its breath smelling of blood and ancient magic. Just as it prepared to deliver the final strike, the ghost of Ryusoji appeared in the corner of the room, faint and translucent. He did not look at the Lord, nor did he look at the guard. His eyes were fixed solely on the cat he had loved. He reached out a spectral hand, and for a moment the Bakeneko stopped its growling. The spirit master shook his head slowly, a gesture of profound sadness and gentle correction. He wanted her to find peace, not to become the very thing that had taken his life away. The Bakeneko's form began to shrink, the jagged edges of its rage softening in the presence of its master's soul. But the transformation was incomplete. The blood she had lapped was too potent, the grudge too deep to simply vanish. With a final mournful cry, the cat turned and fled through the open window into the rain-soaked night.
Oh, Lord.
Mitsushage survived that night, but he was a broken man who spent the rest of his days in a monastery, seeking a forgiveness he never truly found. The Nebushima manor was abandoned, eventually swallowed by the forest and the encroaching moss. Legend says that the Bakeneko still wanders the continental regions, appearing in different traditions under various names. Sometimes she's a trickster who leads travelers astray. In other times, she's a guardian who protects the mistreated. She remains an unfinished spirit, caught between the desire for revenge and the memory of love. In the regional myths of the East, She is a reminder that the bonds we form in life do not simply break at death. They can twist into something monstrous if the ending is unjust, creating spirits that haunt the periphery of our world. Deities and heroes may fight great wars, but it is the minor spirits like the Bakeneko that live in the shadows of our homes. They remind us to be kind to the small and the voiceless, for their hearts are deeper than we can imagine. Komori lived to be an old man, and he never again raised a hand against a cat, no matter how strange it appeared. He would leave a small bowl of milk and a bit of dried fish on his doorstep every night under the full moon. Sometimes in the morning, the bowl would be empty and he would find a single white hair left behind on the stone. He knew that the Bakeneko was still out there, her revenge unfinished because she could not choose between hate and light. The story of Tama and Ryozoji became a staple of folklore, a tale whispered to children to teach them the weight of their choices. It is a story of how a king's pride destroyed a house, and how a cat's love created a legend. Across the continent, from the high mountains to the coastal villages, people still watch the shadows of their pets. They look for the split tail and the glowing eyes, wondering if their own companions carry the seeds of a Bakeneko. The mist on Mount Hiei still hides the ruins of the manor where the wind sounds suspiciously like a purr. Perhaps one day the Bakeneko will find the final piece of her heart, and the cycle of revenge will finally close. Until then, she remains a figure of mystery, a spirit of the regional myths that refuses to be forgotten. The revenge is unfinished. The story is still being written in the tracks she leaves in the snow and the dust. And so, the legend of Bakeneko, the cat's unfinished revenge, continues to echo through the halls of history. Thank you for listening to this legend. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, please comment, like, share. Subscribe to channel Storycraft Studio for more tales of spirits and heroes.